As a Mighty Network host, workshops are a great way to share information, build up the skill set of your community members, and build real connections with your community. My name is Tom, and today we're going to workshop a couple of ways to create an awesome workshop. It's important not to get hung up on the terminology. I'm using the word workshop because that's what my wife and I use with our Mighty Network community, but you could also think of it as a class, a retreat, a summit, a seminar, whatever you want to call it that works. We're calling it workshop because I like the hands-on, active connotation that the term has. It feels like if someone's going to a workshop, they're gonna really work on something and then end with a result. And that's what I really like. And I'll be covering two types of workshops today, but don't feel like you have to be stuck in either of those. If you have other ideas or if you have something that's already working for your community, that's awesome. Keep doing it. But I hope that this will give you some other creative ideas and maybe even help you connect with your community on a deeper level. There are a lot of different ways to host workshops on your Mighty Network, but it makes a lot of sense to have them live within your events page and on your events calendar. Whether your workshop is based around a Zoom meeting, a live stream, or something else, the events page really helps everyone to be organized, helps you to know who's going to go, and helps everyone have everything they need to be prepared so they can get the most out of the workshop. In our community, we like to base our workshops around Zoom because it allows for two-way real-time interaction, and that's what we have found works best for us and our members. Some of our members even host their own workshops, but it's definitely okay to experiment and see what works best for you and your community. If you've never created an event in Mighty Networks, it is super simple. So simple, in fact, that I put together a short video that explains everything you need to know about creating events within your network. So the two types of workshops that we're gonna go over are structured workshops and more free-flowing, unstructured workshops based around a topic. And we'll start first with the structured workshop. I worked for 11 years as a high school teacher, and fortunately, that experience really helped when it came to planning workshops for Mighty Networks, because it turns out there are very few differences between a lesson plan for class and creating a great workshop. And as most teachers probably know, it all starts with something called backwards design or backwards planning. What do you want the community members who come to your workshop to know, think, feel, or be able to do after they're done with the workshop? And that might sound simple and obvious, but a lot of times when people are putting together a workshop or a class type thing, they get focused on the topic and they come up with a whole bunch of things related to that topic, but the points that they're discussing aren't necessarily related. And sometimes the people who attend the workshop end up walking away with their heads kind of swimming with too much information. We like to keep our workshops at about an hour in length because that seems very manageable, and there's really only so much you can cover in an hour, especially if you're allowing time for people to ask questions or share their input and their insights. You gotta kind of keep it small and manageable. So if you have an idea of what you want people to be able to know, think, feel, or do after the workshop, it really helps. No more realistic example would be the community that I run with my wife, which is all for YouTube creators. And so we might want to do a workshop on something like creating a great thumbnail for a YouTube video. So when that workshop is over, we want everyone there to have a great eye-catching thumbnail that communicates the point of the video, but also grabs people's attention and makes them want to click on the video, because that's one of the most important parts of a YouTube video. So if we want people to end with an amazing, beautiful thumbnail, we need to walk people through the steps to get there. One of those would be having a digital file that they're working with, a graphic design file. We're gonna have to tell them the size that they're gonna need to make their thumbnail. We're gonna need to tell them the resolution. We're gonna have to work with them on adding elements. Here's how you put your picture in, here's how you cut out the background, here's how you add in text. Before that, we're gonna have to talk about software. Are you gonna use something like Photoshop? Are you gonna use Canva? Is there some other application that you might be able to use? And before that, when the workshop starts, we'll probably need to talk about thumbnails in general and the basic elements that make a great thumbnail. So we're not just telling them, put this here, click this, do that, and they end up with something that they don't understand why it is the way that it is. But if we start by saying, here's the foundational things. If you have a thumbnail that has these elements, it's probably more likely to help your video to be successful. And then we work through, here's some software you can use, here's the techniques to put a simple thumbnail together. And at the end, you've got your beautiful thumbnail. And I know that probably sounds very simple, but the idea of putting yourself into the shoes of someone who's attending your workshop is crucial, because you've got the curse of knowledge. If you're the person delivering the workshop, you're probably experienced and familiar with whatever it is that you're talking about, and there might be certain elements of that knowledge that you just take for granted. But when someone shows up to your workshop, if they're brand new to it or they're not as experienced, it's important to put yourself in their position and remember the questions you had when you were just starting out, or the stumbling blocks that you don't even think about anymore, but could have been huge demotivating factors if you didn't handle them right when you were just beginning. And throughout a structured workshop, you definitely don't want to steamroll your community members by just, here's information, and they don't even know what happened by the end of it. Definitely important to allow for time to check in with them, see how they're doing, see if they're understanding points that you're talking about. adding in time for them to ask questions and get answers or discuss are all really important and helpful things to include within the planning for your workshop, along with any other elements that you might need. If you are in a community about finance and you're doing a budgeting workshop, it might make sense to provide a link to a downloadable budget template that everyone can get before they jump into the workshop. And when the workshop starts, you can make sure did everybody download that file that you were supposed to have. If they didn't, you can direct them, get everyone on the same page before the workshop starts. You can just add that in your event information. When you create the event in Mighty Networks, you can attach the file or a link to the file that people can download. This is also where you can consider how you want to present your information. If you just want to sit and talk to the camera, that might be effective, but maybe you're going to need some sort of slideshow presentation or a video clip or something to sort of help communicate the information a little better. Maybe it's going to make sense for you to even have multiple cameras set up so you can switch between angles. And a lot of it's just going to depend on your skill set as the community host and the workshop leader. So whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever you think is the most effective way to deliver your information, prep that stuff beforehand. You can never over prepare for a workshop, and then your community members will get the most out of it once they attend. It's also up to you if you want to record the workshop and put the replay up for later. That's something that we like to do because, as you probably know, within Mighty Networks, it's very easy to develop a global community. And so not everyone is going to be able to attend every workshop live because it might be in the middle of the night for them. So if you record the workshop and then put the replay up later that people can watch and ask questions on, that's also a really beneficial thing for your community. And when it comes to structured workshops, I like to end with an element of accountability, which also might be a nicer way of saying homework, because once people have gone to the workshop and they've gotten the knowledge, it's very easy for them to leave and then get overwhelmed with life and kind of forget the stuff that they were so excited about when they were in the workshop. And so if there's some method of accountability, if you say, hey, we did this chocolate chip cookie recipe, I want to see pictures of your batch of cookies, by the end of the weekend. And then either on that events post or on a completely separate post within your community, you can have everyone sharing their batches of beautiful chocolate chip cookies or whatever the outcome might be for your workshop. Some method where people can check in, get accountability, ask questions as they're following up and trying to work through the information that you covered. And that's going to make it seem like the workshop wasn't just this hour that they spent hearing about information, but it's actually something that helped them level up a skill set or a bit of knowledge in their real life. But again, when it comes to a structured workshop, I think all of those successful outcomes really start with backwards planning and having a very clear purpose for what you want your community members to get out of attending your workshop. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another type of workshop, which I'll just call a free-form workshop. And this is kind of what I talked about at the beginning of the structured workshop section, where you have a topic and you sort of have information about the topic, but you're not necessarily gearing up towards a very specific outcome. And what I mean by that is we've had some of our members host camera workshops in our community because YouTube creators and cameras, those are things that are important for that workflow, but learning about cameras and learning how to use them their best can be kind of overwhelming. So we've had a few of our members who are expert photographers, expert videographers, host workshops that are just sort of around a basic topic, like understanding exposure or using the best video settings. And then they lead the workshop where people can come in and ask their specific questions. So someone might ask about something like aperture, while somebody else asks about a specific camera model to buy. Someone else might show up and say, hey, I have this camera, but I'm having this problem with it. What can I do to fix that? And it's all questions related around a topic, but it's not geared towards one specific outcome. But even people who show up to those workshops and don't ask questions and just sort of watch and listen, they usually end up getting some pretty valuable takeaways too. In a way, you could almost think of a free-form workshop as like an office hours session where you have somebody who's very knowledgeable in a specific subject, you sort of set the boundaries of this is what we're talking about, and then people can just show up and ask questions or have discussions about those specific topics. Sometimes when you host a free-form workshop, it might be hard to get the ball rolling because everyone shows up and they're all kind of nervous to ask the first question. So maybe if you have an icebreaker question or at least a point to make, you start by saying, okay, we're doing a camera workshop. Everyone shows up, no one asks questions yet. So you say, hey, do you guys know about the exposure triangle? Let me tell you about shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So you start with some basic information about the topic, and that usually helps to be an icebreaker for people to start asking their questions and bringing in their own topics. And of course, the frequency that you hold workshops totally depends on your community. Personally, in an ideal world, I would think like a once a week workshop might be pretty fun, but you might need to do once a month, once every other week, 3 times a week. It totally depends on you and your community members. And like I mentioned a minute ago, it doesn't have to rely entirely on you as the host, but you can also have your own community members or moderators within your community host their own workshops as well. Of course, if you are allowing other people in your community to host workshops, it's very important that you trust them. It's probably important to meet with them and establish like some guidelines and some ground rules, so that way you know that even if you're not there, that everything is above board and everything is in line with the mission statement and the goals and the culture of your community. And the first few times that somebody else hosts a workshop, it's probably also a good idea for you to sit in and just sort of make sure that everything is going smoothly and that everyone's getting the most out of it. And then once you feel comfortable with it, you don't have to micromanage quite as much. So I hope this gave you some fun and interesting ideas for hosting workshops within your Mighty Networks community. There's almost an unlimited number of ways that you can approach hosting a workshop within your community, but I think it really is one of the best ways to connect with your community members and make your community an incredibly valuable resource for everybody who's involved with it. And if you want to know even more ways to level up your skills as a Mighty Networks host, check out these mighty awesome videos to help you get some new ideas.